Amen. Happy to be here. I like teenagers. They're more fun than adults, but adults have more money. But so you have to decide whether you want to have a good time or you want to have a lot of money. But I happen to get all the poor adults in my church, and so we don't have anything. So I just leave the adults. They're poor and they're no fun. But if you want to find the book of Daniel, if you have a Bible, Daniel chapter 1, and then find Genesis chapter 39. And I want to take you through I don't know what you want to say, maybe the progress in the Christian life or the pattern in the Christian life. I like what Brother Johnson was talking about. I didn't get to hear the preaching Monday or Tuesday night. We had a group come last night and Monday night, and both my sons were working with the group Monday night. And Tuesday night, I guess our bus broke down. I didn't even hear it till I got here. And our bus broke down, and then graciously, the folks from Pacific Baptist brought one of their buses to come help us, and then their bus broke down. And I don't know any of the details. I just now heard that. But anyway, it's a good thing, like Peter said on the Mount of Transfiguration. It's good for us to be here. In the book of Daniel, now most of you know the story of Daniel. You find Daniel 1, find Genesis 30. We might look at a verse in 38 to start with. And I won't preach long to you this morning. I'm going to take 3 lives this morning. I'm going to take a little bit of time and talk about Daniel, take a few minutes and talk about Joseph, and take a few minutes and talk about me, because I'm more real. You can see me. Sometimes you look at Daniel or people in the Bible and you think, oh, yeah, I lived 1,000,000 years ago. Well, this one, I might have been born 1,000,000 years ago, but I'm here still. A couple of things although I'm not as old as Brother Johnson, you could tell that, right? That's right. He's older and wiser. But Daniel, if you look there at just a couple of verses in the first chapter and second chapter, maybe hold both places, because we'll probably go back and forth a little bit, and I'm going to have to get my glasses out so I can see my Bible here. But in Daniel, the story of Daniel, I'm assuming most of you know it. The nation of Israel was taken captive. They were drug away, most of them. A third of them probably died. The poorest of the poor were left behind. And so there's something to be said for being poor. They left you alone because you don't have anything to offer. And then the craftsmen and many of the leaders were carried away to Babylon. And Daniel was a young man. Most people believe a teenager. And, a lot of the things you kind of guess at. But he was young. We know that much. And as a young man, Daniel was carried away. And there's some things that happen in the Christian life. So Daniel in the story is hundreds of miles away from home, different language, different food. I don't know how many of you have ever traveled to another country or gone to a weird restaurant. We have some folks that were coming to our church years ago, and they're from Thailand, and the food just doesn't smell good. Tastes great. You just got to, it's like in our home growing up when my mom would cook cabbage. You should always cook cabbage outside. It smells nasty. I don't mind the taste of it. Just don't make me smell it when you're cooking it. Or broccoli. Better to smell a chocolate sundae than broccoli or cabbage cooking. But Daniel was in a far-off land, different language, different culture, different everything. You know what's neat? He had a position because the king needed Daniel's culture. The king needed Daniel's unique background. My son is tomorrow morning early heading to Trinidad and Guyana for the rest of summer, and we're having to get shots of all kinds. We have no idea what they stuck in his arm and what they're making him take, but anyway, all kinds of things. But he's going to another country to try and be a help and spend the rest of summer there. But think about this. We're filling out these papers, and they want to know, there's a whole page to describe who you are. You're ethnic, you're this, you're that. I mean, section after section. I said, just write down you're a right-handed Norwegian, and the rest is none of their business. But you know what? God did make you just like you are. So here's the king in Babylon, and he's conquering nation after nation. And we're not talking about Russia and America. We're talking about Long Beach and Lakewood. The kingdoms then were small, and 150, 200 little kingdoms, and they had to figure out how to run these places. They all had their own goofy religions and backgrounds and cultural identities, and some people didn't like Taco Bell. You just got to deal with the people in life that have emotional issues. Some people don't like In and Out. Can you imagine anybody not liking In and Out? I can't even imagine that. You get a 4x4 because it makes one real burger, right, Brother Johnson? But so the king would say, all right, anybody here live in Long Beach? Raise your hand. All right, good. We got a lot of Long Beach people. So I might pick the sharpest 2 or 3 from Long Beach to help me to make sure we got them all figured out. And then anybody from Lakewood? All right, so I'm going to pick 2 or 3 of the sharpest Lakewood people, and they're going to come help me because I got to make decisions to keep peace in this whole place. Where else are you from? No one was willing to admit. You ashamed of where you're from? Santa Clarita? Who's from Santa Clarita? Well, I guess you're my helper. If you're the only one, you can run the whole place. You're from Arizona. All right, so I'm going to pick 2 or 3 from Arizona because they're over there where they don't know what water is. And why does anyone live in Arizona? Because it's cheaper, it's more conservative, and you can carry a gun. All those are all good reasons. So the king had bring people in, and the king said, I need 2 or 3 of the sharpest, by the way, educated, because it does matter that you go to school. You may have a hurting life, but you still ought to go to school and get the best you can get. So he brings these guys in from Santa Clarita and from Lakewood and from Long Beach and maybe even somebody from Wildemar, although no one cares about Wildemar, and from Arizona. And he says, now you guys got to help me because all these people have unique needs. And I need you. And someone says, man, I'm from Compton. Anybody from Compton? All right. I taught at I don't know if you ever heard of Brother Johnson. J. Vernon McGee started a Bible college in Watts. Not Compton, I was thinking Compton, but in Watts. And it was LABTS, Los Angeles Bible Training School. And it was all geared around inner city black pastors great guys who just not had enough school. J. Vernon McGee and some other guys went in and started this school, and I got to go preach there and teach in their college for a while. You talk about fun. Chapel was fun. Hannah left. Look, I show up to preach, and Hannah leaves. I was going to compliment her and her husband's choice of wives, but the guy playing the piano wore a football jersey, and he was as wide as the piano, and he played all the keys. It was fun, man. You never heard Leaning on the Everlasting Arms quite like I heard it. The word leaning, 17 syllables. Leaning, come on, leaning. And how do they all do it together? It was great. I loved it. And I got to preach. That was the funnest. You've probably been around some of the environment there, Brother John. That is the funnest place to teach the Bible and preach. It was great. But to live there is a little different neighborhood. One of my secretaries grew up in Watts and told the stories of different neighborhoods and dad coming back with a gun to kill everybody and the mom had them scatter like, just hiding everywhere and a rough world. But the fact is, the king Nebuchadnezzar and the other kings there, if they were going to try and get done what they wanted done, they had to have somebody from Compton. They had to have somebody from Watts. They had to have somebody from Lakewood. They had to have somebody from Long Beach. And some of the folks said, you know what? I grew up in a stinking place. It was hard. Daniel said, my whole country's gone. Man, our city is just a wreck. Buildings are crumbling. Schools are a wreck. Anybody with any brains left? And the king says, I need you, man. I need you. And Daniel lost his parents and lost any siblings he had, and he lost his home, lost his church, lost his school, and he got drugged across the country, crossed Saudi Arabia, and dropped off over there because the king needed him. And there's some of you here today, you might have had some things happen in your past that are hard, but let me tell you something, the king needs you. You're no accident. You're no, what am I going to do in this mess I'm in? No, you just do the will of God. And trust him, because God did not accidentally have you show up where you are. God's not looking out of heaven thinking, oh no, what am I going to do with him, man? No, God knows where you are. God knows your parents. God knows your background. God knows the money you have or don't have. God knows the school you go to. God knows the school you ditch. God knows all that stuff. God knows some of you sit in church with your parents. God knows some of you like me. You ever sit in church with your parents, Brother Johnson? Never. I never did. One time I sat in church with my dad because he had left us and I went to visit him and he was dating a gal who went to a Presbyterian church. I was so shocked. Never so shocked in my life. Saturday night, my dad said in the morning, we're going to go to church. I said, what? We never got to church. He said, yeah, Elsie goes to church. We're going to go with her. He said, it'll be good for you boys. I was like, yeah. The only time I sat with my dad in church, we weren't a church family. I drew beer out of the keg for my dad, but he always had a keg of beer in the refrigerator in the garage. We did not have a Christian home. But you know what? God reached into my world because he needed Bruce Goddard. Because where I'm from, I have something to offer. The King of Kings. And so do you. And some of you, like my son, who was here last night with a busload of teenagers. He's our youth pastor now. He's my oldest. He's 33. My youngest is 19. He was here Monday night helping with the teenagers. And those kids have all their life been in church with their dad and mom. They never sat with me in church either. You ever notice that? Ask my son, you ever sit in church with your dad? No. He's always up there yelling at everybody. My kids sat with mom over on the right-hand side every service, unless they were in a kid's service or whatever. But see, God needed me from a home with no church. God needed my kids from a home with church 24/7. God had a plan. Now, God reached down and got a hold of Daniel. Now, look with me at the book of Daniel. And the first thing that happens, if you're going to be of value to the king, see, he's already there. And let's just look down at Daniel, very familiar passage. The king there in Babylon, he had his ideas of what to give him, and he was going to give him some of the king's meat and food and drinks and different things. But look at verse 8 and 9. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, that's like saying to the guys in the gang you hang around, I'm not going where you're going, wearing what you're wearing, talking like you're talking. Daniel is not home. He had no security. He is hundreds and hundreds of miles away in a different world, a different culture, and they brought the food out he was supposed to eat. He said, no, I don't eat that. It's like we're in the Philippines. They were our young people were having a balut eating contest. I don't do balut. American, white, pale. Mexican food is Taco Bell. Chinese food is Panda Express. I'm just a lousy diet American. But here Daniel is. He said, nope. Number one, the king needs you. But you're going to have to say no to some things to be useful to the king. Now, God needs what you've got. God needs your background. He needs your parents. One of the best girls that was here Monday night and Tuesday night, I won her mom to Christ 35 years ago. Her mom's been on the street most of the last 35 years. She's been raised by grandparents, and every time I preach a sermon and talk about honoring your mother and father, I struggle when I see her in the audience. She has no concept of a mother and father. I'm not sure she knows who her father is. And I preach about Father's Day or Mother's Day or doing something nice and thinking about your parents. I think about her and many others in our church like them. But God reached down into heaven and said, I need you. But the first thing, to be useful. Now, you're useful to God. Every one of you is useful to God right where you are. But the first thing you're going to have to do to have your gifts be of use to God is you're going to have to say no. Verse 8, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's meat and the drink. There's some things you're going to have to say, no, I ain't going to do that. I'm not going to hang around that immoral crowd. I remember I was in Bible college, a freshman. I got saved at 18. Started into college, secular college. Then I was right away 18 months later or so in a Bible college. And I was in a room full of college guys. You young men here know how guys are. Guys don't always talk right. And it was a group of guys. And a guy just out of the blue blurted out and said, hey. And he said, hey, Bruce. And he said, what about? And he said something about something inappropriate. I got 3 or 4 or 5 guys I'm in college with, in Bible college. And I was about to have to make a stand. How is it going to answer that question? You know, you don't have to answer every question thrown out to you. I said, I don't think Christian guys need to talk about things like that. And I got up and walked out. I'm the only one that made it into the ministry of that room. You know, if you're going to be, see, that you are useful to God goes without saying. God knows right where you are. You're the littlest. You're the one that struggles in school the most. I honestly, and I've said this before, but I want everybody to know it, I didn't learn to read where I could pick up a book and comfortably open it until I was pastoring a church. I struggled reading anything but my Bible, and I didn't start reading that till I was in college. You say, how'd you get into college? I played basketball. When you play basketball, you don't have to be able to read, except sign here. And God knows where you are. You've got something important. But in order for what you have to be of value to the king, somebody's going to have to step out of the crowd and say, nope, I don't do that. Don't talk that way. I don't do that. Guy reaches over to put his arms on you. You just slug him right square in the nose. Girls, let me give you some instruction here. The cheek doesn't hurt. Right square on the nose. He will cry and his nose will bleed. And you can do it quick. I was going to have Daniel come help me, but I won't do that. But, I mean, the back of your hand, just pop them right square in the nose with those knuckles right there, just real hard. Whack! And his eyes will water involuntarily. His nose will bleed. And I promise you, he'll jerk back and say, you want any more, buddy? You're going to have to say no to some things. You're going to have to say no to liquor. I was sitting, I wasn't even a Christian yet, but God had been working on my heart. A guy had been talking to me. He didn't know quite how to go through the gospel. And I'd been watching some young people in our church and in our high school as a public school student. And my girlfriend, my wife was one of them. And I knew these 3 or 4 girls. They went to church. And you know what? Christians have something the world doesn't have. They do. And I didn't even know what it was, but they had something there. And a couple of these guys that went to that church, and one of them been talking to me. Well, I was over at my very best friend's house, into summer, going to college maybe in a week or 2. And I'm in his house, and his parents are out of town, and just probably 20, 25 teenagers hanging around, and music playing, and just hanging out together. And he comes out with a case of beer, and he starts walking around the room, just people pulling off a can, pulling off a can, pulling off a can. And look, I'm not even a Christian yet. I'm in my best friend's living room, but God had been doing something in my heart. And he got to me, and I said, no thanks. I didn't make a scene. I just said no. And it's so funny. He looked at me. It was kind of dark, and he leaned toward me. He said, they're going to get you, aren't they, Bruce? It's like the aliens. Ooh. But he knew I'd been hanging around these Christians. I knew what he meant. He knew what he meant. And I looked right back at him. And he'd say, oh no, give me 2. Give me 2. I want to be like you. He said, they're going to get you, aren't they, Bruce? I said, yep, I think they are. And I got up and walked out. You see, it's already settled that you matter to God. It's already settled that you from Arizona and you from Compton and you from Lakewood and you from Long. It's already settled. God made you. And yes, maybe you're in a broken home and a single mom raising you, and maybe you're in a home where you're living with grandparents, and our youth department has a lot of that. We'll have half our teenagers Sunday morning will be from homes where they ride our bus, and parents, they don't have parents that'll take them to church. And one of our teenage boys comes all the time, was out on the street looking for money, just saying he's homeless. Little liar. He's got a mom and dad in a home. I want to punch him, but anyway. He's a stupid kid. He got a lot of money out of it, but God needs you. God needs you from your racial background, your educational background, your lack of athletic background. God needs you, number one. That is settled. God knows every hair on your head. God knows your language. God knows your parents and your grandparents. God has a plan to use you. Because in order to reach his world, the king needs you and just what you've got to offer. But if you're not willing to say no to this stupid world a little bit, ain't going to happen. I said no to the best friend I had as he walked around with a case of beer, walked out, was never at a party again. I got saved, I think it was the next week. Then I'm off in Bible college, and I hear some Christian guy bringing up indiscreet, inappropriate comments, and I had to, again, take my stand, and I just said, you know what? I don't think Christian guys ought to talk about that. And I got up and walked out of the room. Just because you're in Bible college doesn't mean the dorms are always going to be appropriate. Doesn't mean everybody's going to think right. I had to make some decisions. I want you to look over just a couple of verses if you didn't lose your place. You're still in Daniel chapter 1. Look at verse 17. And as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in visions. Isn't that something? When Daniel, now look, Daniel came from trouble. Daniel came from a bad area. But he had something the king needed. When Daniel said, no, I won't eat that, I won't drink that, I'm not going to go with the rest of the crowd. By the way, he and his friends were the only 4 who said no. As far as we know. You may be the only one in your youth group. Now, God wants everybody in the youth department. But the only ones he can use are the ones who step out and say, ain't going that way. Not going to talk like that. Not going to be like, and it doesn't mean you're not going to stumble and mess up. That's when you step up to the youth department, youth pastor, your pastor, or Sunday school teacher, say, hey, I was out of line. I'm sorry. The other day in church, I got on to some teenagers. They were cutting up, and I said, now stop it. Hold it down. Started preaching again. They only get once, maybe 2 chances. And I walked down, and I said, all right, let me explain something. You're going to be quiet. You're going to look at me. You're going to listen, or I'm walking you out of this building. Do you understand? I finished the sermon. I don't have to do that maybe once every couple months. And everybody realizes and teenagers, most teenagers aren't bad when they're talking. The adult is boring. Or they've got an attention span of a butterfly. And they've never learned to pay attention. So I help them learn to pay attention. I try to use humor, and I try to use some things that would help in speech, and then sometimes I get in their face after church. All 4 of those teenagers came up to me and said, Pastor, we're so sorry. They handled it perfect. I said, thanks, man. You're awesome. See you next Sunday. Get a ride back tonight if you can. Nothing wrong with you stumbling. God needs you. God needs your background. God needs your hurt. God needs your suffering. God needs the things that went wrong in your life, because somebody in that kingdom that belongs to Jesus, he needs you to help that somebody out. But he can't use you if you don't first learn to say no. Daniel said, ain't going to eat that, ain't going to drink that. I'm not going to hang with that crowd. I'm not going to wear my ball cap sideways. I'm not going to wear my pants down to my knees. I'm not going to wear shorts that look like I'm wearing culottes. I'm a man. Model myself after the restroom door. A man or a girl. You're going to look like a lady. You're just going to have to say no to some things. But man, if you look at the scripture in here, we're going to go to Genesis, but he checked these guys out. He said, they're 10 times better. But how'd they get that way? Look at that verse we just read there. Look at verse 17. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill. You know what happens? Let me use one of you. Hey, Miami Beach guy. Come on up here. I'm not going to try the nose thing on you. What's your name? What is it?
Luis.
Luis. So, Luis, you're going to step out from that worldly crowd there, all right? You're done with them, even the pretty ones. Now, God needs Luis. But if he's going to be useful to God, he's going to have to say no and step out of the crowd. Isn't that right? So we already looked at. Now, here's what happens. When God sees Louise take that first step. We're going to use these hymnals as wisdom and knowledge. God's going to say, man, if you're willing to step out for me, I'm going to give you something. And the next time you go down the story of Daniel a little bit further, they said, Daniel, you can't pray. Daniel said, oh, yeah, I'm going to pray. 3 times a day, open my windows, and I'm going to pray. So take another step, Luis. He steps out again, risks his life. God says, you're awesome, Luis, man. I need you, buddy. Now, you're pretty dumb like a rock, so I'm going to give you what you need. And you see, every time you take a step out for God, God gives you more. Why? Because he needs you. God needs everything Luis has. But he doesn't have enough of the knowledge and the wisdom about life for him to do what God needs him to do. All of Luis's background is important to God, but he needs spiritual knowledge. He needs spiritual understanding. And so Luis, God comes along and gives him some. And the fact is, take another step, Luis. Let me find some more wisdom here. And he steps out from the crowd again. All his friends are going to wherever. And he says, no, you know what? I'm just going to stay in church faithful. In fact, I think I'm going to see if I can help on that bus route. God says, you're incredible, man. I need you, Luis. And every time you take a step out, God pours some more into you. Now, already you've got what God needs, but the problem is you don't have the wisdom and the strength to do all that is before you. Thank you, Luis. You can have a seat, buddy. Now, we're going to have to hurry, but let me just summarize this story and tell you about Joseph. Let's go back to Joseph's life. How does this apply to Joseph? Joseph, he's home. He's a favorite little brother. How many of you are the little brother? Aren't we superior? 2 girls had their hands up. Brother, we need to work on that, Brother Ross. Okay. Little brother is usually the boy, and little sister is the girl. But anyway, we won't talk about that. There's nothing pointed here in this lesson today. I'm the littlest. I'm the younger brother, and they're definitely a little step above. How many of you are the older brother and you're irritated at the way the little one's babied? Doesn't that irritate you? I know I irritated my brother. Here's Joseph. He's got these older brothers, and God says to Joseph, or his dad says to Joseph, your brothers are all out working, but little Joey, we don't want him to go out and endanger himself. He pats him in the head. We're going to keep you home, Joseph. But Joseph gets out and notices his brothers are breaking some rules and doing some things wrong. He's the younger brother. These guys are the ones who are taking care of the flocks and the herds and everything. And he comes back and says, hey, Dad, I want you to know something. Those guys are doing wrong. So his dad rips them up and chews them, beats them, hits them with sticks or whatever. I don't know what they did in those days. Chops their fingers off. See, Joseph had to take a step for right. He had to step out and say, we're going to do the right thing when I'm around. My daughter-in-law, she walked into her dorm room at Hyles Anderson College years ago, and she said she'd been out of the dorms doing whatever for the day. She came back in, 2 or 3 girls in the room, and they had smuggled a TV into her room. She had a decision to make. She said she walked in. She saw the TV. She said, I'll be back in a few minutes, and that will be gone. She left. She was giving 0. You're going to have to do that over and over and over in your Christian life. So here Joseph is. He stepped out and did right. You know what they did? They sold him as a slave. But there's a verse 4 times in life of Joseph you can read. But the Lord was with Joseph. You see, because Joseph was willing to step out of the crowd and say, I'm not going to do that. It didn't make him popular with the crowd. It made him hated by the crowd. They sold him. But it made him very popular with God. And God began to pile wisdom in Joseph's life. Pretty soon he's in charge of Potiphar's house. He gets lied about there, ends up in jail. Pretty soon he's in charge of the jail. And from jail he becomes second in command of the whole nation of Egypt. And it all started with God saying, I want you, and him saying, and I want you. And this morning, can I just say this? I'm not the smartest kid on the block. Brother Johnson's incredibly smart. I've heard him preach a lot. He is so smart. But you don't have to be smart. You have to be you. And God, like Nebuchadnezzar's got this incredible kingdom, and he needs you. Why he let Brother Johnson have Northern California with trees and me in Wildemar where they don't know what green is, I'm not sure. But God needed me in a little town of 1,000 people called Wildemar. But I'd have never made it except when the guy was walking around with a case of beer. I had to step out and say, no, I don't want any. And when they started talking inappropriately in the guys' rooms, I had to step out and say, no, we're not talking like that. And over and over and over, you ask anybody in the ministry, your Christian life is not about whether you matter. You matter. You do matter. You've got something I can't give God. I've got a picture of the Esposito family and all of you on my wall, and I pray for all of you faithfully. And I think every one of those young people uniquely created, same mother and father, same church, same schools, but everyone perfectly created for God. Look at Joe was over here a few minutes ago. I was going to use he and Hannah. Joe grew up in a preacher's home up in Bakersfield and met Hannah here at college. By the way, it's a good place to go to school. Met Hannah. I don't know how it happened, but they ended up married. She's an incredible girl. You marry a girl as good as Hannah, you'll get hired just so they can get your wife's fingers to play the piano. Hey, God needs you. But you're going to have to say, no, I ain't going there. And then something else is going to happen. You're going to have to say, no, I'm going to go there. And what's going to happen is little by little, see, leaders are always outside the camp, just a little bit. And every time you say no and step out from the world, God is going to give you a little more of this. Let me close with this. One of our girls, she was 9 years old, started riding our bus. And parents were not, I don't know, they're a mess. Her dad came to pick her up one day from church, and then I saw him out in the parking lot by himself in the car, and I went out to tell him he's got to get off the property because it's private property. I just didn't feel like I wanted him on the property when kids were getting out and getting picked up. And I would go walking over. He said, hey, I'm so-and-so's dad. I said, I'm so glad to meet you. And 9 years old, she started coming riding our bus. I've still got a picture of her in her blue jeans and T-shirt jumping off a bus. She was in the air when the picture was snapped, just a little scrawny toothpick of a girl. Started coming more and more faithfully. I remember seeing her standing on the street, the main street down her side of town, waiting for the bus, had her Bible in her hand. And she's wearing a skirt. Couldn't believe it. The next year, she was in our Christian school. A few years later, she graduated and was in Bible college. A few years later, she was at our church with her husband, who rode a bus from his church in L.A., and they're now very well-known missionaries. And she now speaks in ladies' conferences. And she has got so much to offer. From just a very difficult home. And she said right off, we had her testimony the other day at our church. She said, I came because the bus was fun and they gave us candy. So bus workers, keep making it fun and keep giving out candy. But see, every time she stepped out from the world, God gave her a little more and gave her a little more. And God needed that girl now in Central America. She is the lady. When they have a conference, she's the one speaking to all the pastors' wives. Because God needed her. But she was willing to step out and step across that line of compromise. You're important to God. The question is he important enough to you? Like Brother Johnson said, are you willing to stay right there where God could use you to do something great? Let's pray.